For quite some time, the South African aviation community has been fighting a silent war against a single date on the calendar. The mandatory 12-year engine overhaul rule has ground a perfectly healthy aircraft, drained bank accounts, and pushed many passionate pilots out of the sky. But today, the wind has shifted. In a landmark decision, CAASA's CARCom has formally approved the transition to a condition monitoring program. It is the victory the industry has been waiting for. Or is it? Joining us to break down exactly what this means, how we got here, and most importantly, when you can finally stop worrying about the 12-year deadline, is the CEO of CAASA, Kevin Storie.
Cleared for takeoff. This is Let's Wing It.
Kevin joins us now. Kevin, it's great to see you. Thank you firstly for taking the time to join us here on Let's Wing It. It's great to see you. Firstly, are you well?
I'm very well. All doing well.
All right, let's dive straight in. The media release, in your own words, right? How significant is the moment for survival, especially for the GA community in South Africa, Kevin?
So it's a massive element that we've been trying to get to over the past 4 years. I think the media release is just explaining that we've sort of got over that hurdle. We've got to the stage where it's going to be recommended to the Minister of Transport, and should there be no other issues, it will be implemented. So as soon as that is implemented via promulgation, and we believe there will be an urgent promulgation, then everybody can start using the new regulation, and that will get the people back in the air, basically the pilots and the operators.
Right.
So it's critical.
Let me just dive in quickly, CARCom. If you can maybe just explain to us, how has CARCom been established and how does it fit into the industry? Let's say the owner fly association between the CAA, how does that all fit in?
Okay, so CARCom is actually a body that has been around since before there was a civil aviation regulator. It is a recommending committee that basically analyzes the regulations or any proposals, works through them with experts from the industry and the regulator, and then creates the regulations in a format with the legal team from CAA, and then that is then recommended to the minister. So CARCom is a formally is a committee that is gathered from voting members of the industry and the regulator. The regulator commands for each of their divisions a seat on CARCom, and they have a voting right. And then each of the associations and interested parties that have passed the criteria, they get a voting seat on CARCom. And it's that group that makes the final decisions on the recommendations. So it's almost a statutory body. It is documented in the Act as to how it operates, and it's got terms of reference. So not everybody can make the decisions there. However, they can participate in the subsections of that, the subcommittees and the work groups, and that's where it comes in. So it's been around for a long time, and I think I've served on it for approximately 16 years now.
Okay. So, I mean, CARCom as well, if you put the AIC 18.19, if you put it together and the whole thing that's been going on with it up until thus far, it wasn't an overnight process. Let's call it a win if we really want to. We'll elaborate on that a little bit later, but it wasn't an easy process. Maybe can you give us a bit of a breakdown of this whole task to put this all together?
Okay, so first you have to go back to what is an AIC. It's an information circular. And what happened in previous times, when there was a problem in regulation, they would write an AIC which would govern. But as the movement to get into line with correct regulatory methodologies and the legal elements of it, you can't regulate by an AIC. So the regulator correctly started taking all the AICs that are out there and creating them into regulation. So what happened with the AIC 1819, they saw that there was a problem with it and they needed to put it into regulations. However, what they did is they just whole scale removed a whole lot of them without seeing what the problem would be or what the impact on the industry, both economically and practically, would be. So they removed those. And at the same time, they put together a work group to change all of that via the CARCom process. And that happened approximately for almost 2.5, 3 years. And it was going very well. It was a positive. There was good negotiation. Everything was there. But the element that was left out was, what are we going to put in place of the ARC 1819? And that was said, we will get to it, we'll get to it, we'll get to it. And eventually, by the regulator not getting to it, even after many requests, and all the organizations that were participating in those work groups, they eventually realized we're not going to go anywhere. And at the Aero SA at the time, the event at Lanseria, just at that stage, there was a final meeting with the Minister of Transport requesting, please, could something be done? And they said, we must put in what we want done within basically 48 hours, which we did. And the regulator was supposed to come back within a 72-hour period, which they failed to do. And that then preempted the legal maneuvering that then started. But it was done very nicely up to there. It was missing the segment. And what we've ultimately got to now is precisely what we asked for back then.
Right. And
the contents of the ARC 1819 is very, very similar to what we've got here. Just a few extra additions were in. And what we were wanting to do was to take the contents of the ARC 1819, create, as there is an appendice now, a program and update it. It's 20 years since that program was created in the ARC 1819, just updated with the modern technologies, all the rest of it. So we've ultimately got where we want at huge cost to the industry. It's not just the cost of the court case, it's the cost of the aircraft on the ground, the loss of revenue. It's massive. And it goes into most probably billions.
But what I'm trying to wrap my head around, Kevin, is the whole thing of calendar time versus engine health time, if you want to call it that for lack of a better term or description. Would you say that this has fundamentally been a flawed concept, or how would you describe it?
I think it is a flawed concept, but you have to go back to where it came from. In the United States many years ago, there was a lot of legal claims against the OEMs. So the OEMs had to do something about it because Cessna, etc., at some stage even stopped producing aircraft. So they put in legal reasons as to how to safely look at it. And should it be 10 years? Should it be 8 years? Should it be 12 years? They went with the 12-year element that after 12 years, the seals, all of those sort of things would have probably denatured. So by then, you should have done an overhaul, which would replace the seals. It's not the real metallic parts that we're worried about or that the OEM's worried about. It's the seals, the gaskets, those elements that over time degenerate. And they also degenerate from lack of use. So the original plans of the OEMs was for aircraft that are stored or not used regularly. If they exercised a lot, then those seals that don't fail, like is imagined. And the interesting thing was, in South Africa, we have 20 years of records. There are no safety cases on that because of the program. The ARC 1819 program regularly looked at all of these things. So we have a difference, and the world has a difference with what the OEMs want, because they want to protect themselves from a legal perspective, from the liability of somebody claiming against them, where the movement is to do it on condition. If all the parameters are right and the engine is exercised regularly and the wear and tear is within the norms that the OEM sets, that aircraft could last for 30 years, as long as it's been checked regularly, it's been maintained meticulously according to the requirements of the OEM. And I think we're getting there, and I think we've got more tools available. The AMOs are better. We've got microscopes, we've got borescopes, we've got oil analysis. There's many tools that we have that can make sure that we can do the preventative stuff that would stop the burning crash at the end of the runway.
I want to get to that a little bit later of exactly how that can be applied now. But now, how does this amendment bring South Africa in line with, let's say, the FAA or EASA standards?
Yeah, so you need to go through all of the countries. America is very much at the forefront, but the Australians, and we normally measure ourselves against the Australians, they even allow air schools or training schools, ATOs, to operate with these aircraft. We have in South Africa, and when we say we, I say the regulator because we disagree with the regulator. They have decided that it's only for Part 91 operators. So this is individuals that fly for personal use of the aircraft, no commercial gain. So for training, all the commercial side, that's negated out of this. So as far as that is concerned, the rest of the world has made provision against the OEMs or in spite of the OEMs. So the OEMs have certain things, like Lycoming has got quite a nice program already in place, and I think they're quite advanced. Continental, a little bit different. And then you've got the likes of Rotax and all of those. But most of our engines here are Lycoming and Continental that are affected by this ruling.
Condition Monitoring Program, the CMP, right? Just explain to us, what is that now exactly? And for like a pilot that's not an engineer or owner that doesn't do engineering, just flying basically, what exactly is this CMP?
So a CMP is basically, there's a set of parameters, so wear levels, operating hours, tolerances, all those sort of things that are put into a program. And on those bases, if you're within those tolerances, the aircraft engine is basically safe for use. So what happens with the program, there's a set of timings and what to look for on any engine. Right. And that program, once approved by the regulator, it may differ from engine to engine and aircraft to aircraft, but once that program is approved or accepted by the regulator, and you allow your AMO with the AMEs doing the work, to follow that program religiously and document it all accordingly in the packs, etc., then your aircraft is considered, it's going to be operating within those tolerances. So it's then on condition. It says that the condition of that engine is safe for flight, or generally safe for flight. Obviously, nothing is 100%, but it's a really good guide as to what's happening. And with the new program that they're putting in place, they want to have a look at certain things in the very first period of it, and then they relax it as it goes, showing that the AMEs and the AMOs are taking responsibility for it. So there's not a big change from what was in the past, what they were doing. Right. It's just going to be a little bit more regular and a little bit more thorough.
Yes. Well, that leads me to the next question, because, a lot of people might say, yeah, this is a get out of jail free card, right? Is it the case, or would you say it's actually going to require more discipline, and especially regarding maintenance from the owners now?
So it's going to not create any more discipline from the owners. The owners already cede that responsibility over to their AMOs. The AMOs have got a program, they are maintaining it. The owner just has to see, is it meeting this hour? It needs this service done, etc. So they are going to follow that program. That program is now going to be the new program. So you're not going to be following the OEM's program. Because remember, once you've got to 12 years, the OEM says overhaul. You are now going to be following this new program that you're going to operate the aircraft against, which our regulator will accept. I just want to add the other man, if you are going to be selling that aircraft on, or you want it to go back to OEM spec, it's very simple. You are going to have to overhaul that aircraft. So if it's going to go into commercial use, or if it's going to go into a training school, even if it's been run under Part 91 on this program, and let's say it was supposed to be 12 years and now it's 24 years, because we haven't put a limit on years.
Okay, all right.
Then you would then have to do that overhaul, and then it would then resell it, set it back to the OEM's requirements, and then you would follow then the OEM's program for maintenance.
Right. So, but that's for the owners, right?
The owner, it's ultimately the owner or operator's responsibility, but who takes the responsibility or enacts that responsibility, it is your chosen AMO and the AMEs do it as per the work packs. So it's the AMOs that are going to be guiding on how this is applicable for each and every owner or operator's aircraft.
How will that look? Is there going to be like an annexure or a document or something stating like a template that needs to be followed?
So there is the Appendix 3 out of Part 43 that has been developed. The original one, when it was brought to CARCom, said it was in great condition, it's ready to go, and it was pulled because it was not. The work that needed to be done was done at the CARCom work groups, and we had everybody involved at that stage. It's after the court case. We had the Part 91 consortium, all their people were involved there. All the AMOs were involved. There was a lot of work that was done. The regulator did a lot of work as well, because at that stage they realized they have to do the work. So it's a comprehensive program. There's a template for it. The AMOs obviously will take that and adjust it per aircraft, per engine number,
Yes.
per whatever.
Okay.
So there might be some slight nuances, but there is an overall methodology. It will be very quick to implement because the AMOs have already been doing this. They just didn't document it precisely like it's going to be required to be documented now. So it's not a big change. It's actually very easily done. There might be some downtime. For example, oil analysis, etc., you're going to have to send it away. How you get that oil analysis, the methodology for capturing it. Some of the AMOs may not have been doing that. Where are you going to get it done, etc., etc. So those practical implementations are going to have to come into place. The costs of those obviously are going to be a little bit extra.
Yeah.
So there are going to be some extra costs, etc., but we don't believe exorbitantly so. And because it's only going to be the hard graph to set a standard or a baseline for your engine, that's going to happen over the first year. After that, then it's off that baseline with your oil samples and all the rest will get less and less and less. It basically goes back to almost what the ARC 1819 was doing in South Africa.
So where does that leave Part 135, Part 141 operations?
So 141 and 135, it leaves them in a very simple thing, and it's not what we want. They will have to overhaul their aircraft. They will have to follow the OEM's 12-year rule. So if the OEM says you must overhaul at so many hours and at so many years, whichever comes first, you have to do that. And it brings in the question, what are we going to do for owner training? Because they've got a 91 aircraft, and some of them are very unique aircraft. They're going to need to. So that the regulator hasn't answered. They said they're coming back to it, and it's still on the table for the regulator to deal with that. In meetings that have happened around that from the legal side of CAA, they do not want that to happen. They want the OEM element covered so that the legal liability is not on the regulator. It's now on the OEM and the owner. Remember, the regulator wants to operate from a risk-based element. They want to not be held liable or accountable and remove their risk. So this is very convenient for them. They take no risk.
Yeah.
Now, who takes the risk? It's going to be the owner and the AMO. The regulator is not really going to do it. However, I don't believe they completely can get rid of that risk. And I think by the approval of this, once it's signed off by the minister, technically the Director of Civil Aviation, because Appendix C falls under the CAT side of it, she will take responsibility, and the Minister of Transport ultimately will take the responsibility.
Do you think there will be some more discussions for Part 135 or 141, or do you think that's pretty much set in stone now?
I think there might be for the owner training and maybe for the 141, but I think for 135, I do not see an appetite at the regulator that they're going to go for it, because world's best practice in the other countries are not doing that. Because remember, for a 135, you're going to be moving a person, somebody, and it's very difficult. The risk gets very, very big, and the liability and the possibility of court cases that could go on for years with crashes, etc. I don't think there's an appetite for it. But the possibility for training, I think there's an outside chance for training schools or ATOs to still possibly do that. Once they see how this thing works, I don't think immediately, but maybe over a year or two, possibly. And I think the owner training absolutely has to be looked at. And I think the jury is, as I say, is still out on that one with the regulator.
Let's make this practical. Let's say owner sits with an engine that is now past the 12-year rule. Let's say on 13 or 14 years now. How's that going to affect them now? Is it the new CMP? Is it going to help them to resurrect the engine, if I can call it that? Or how does that apply?
Okay, so bluntly, and it was a very clever way that the regulator dealt with this. The regulator didn't ground any aircraft, and that's been their position. The owner has to ground their aircraft. If they were not in compliance with their maintenance program and what the OEM said, they had to ground the aircraft. So most of these aircraft, the Lycoming, etc., they have been grounded. So they've been on the ground. Have the owners and the AMOs been doing maintenance of these for an aircraft that's now been mothballed? That question is out there. We don't know. The other element is, have the pilots, etc., been training? Have they been flying? Some of them not, because that was their only aircraft. So there's a lot of safety issues that are going to come in. Now, those aircraft that have been on the ground, they've now got to be brought onto this program. The question posed to the regulators, how are you going to do that? They haven't guided us on how they're going to do that. Because normally, if it doesn't have a C of A, you have to go through the process to get it a C of A, which is a whole bunch of inspections, etc. So we are hoping that the regulator will allow the AMOs to check it out with a special dispensation, and then just bring it automatically and as if it had not been without a C of A. But the simple answer is we don't know yet, and the regulator has not guided. And it's not the team that worked on it, the 91, the GA department that developed these regulations. It's going to fall under the airworthiness section run by Lebang Tabansu. And most of the issues that we've had up to date, that is the department that the industry has been battling to get them on board, and is very much that department that's risk averse. So we will see how that pans out. They have given assurities from the executive that runs that division that these ones fall underneath, that there is going to be some sort of relief. That's what they believe. Okay. So much as even from CARCom that happened last week in off-record discussions, there is an intent that happens there. And in my meetings that I've had with the Director of Civil Aviation, there is an intention that they're going to give some sort of relief and come up with some sort of program that can get those aircraft back in. But what that is, we don't know yet.
Not yet.
But I'm sure we'll get involved in it as it happens.
Let's throw it around a bit. Let's talk about the time between overhauls, right? In terms of hours, if an engine hits a 2,000 hour before the 12 hour now, does the CMP now still allow it to run on condition?
No, you're going to run everything up until you meet you fall out of the limits of the OEM. So if you've exceeded the maximum hours allowed on that engine, then you can go on to the CMP program. If you exceed the years, the calendar years, then you would go on to the CMP program. That program then will take over from the OEM's program. But until you've reached that, it's a type certified aircraft. You continue with that as per that program.
Makes sense.
And I just want to make very clear for your viewers and the individuals that be listening to this, the non-type certified aircraft are not affected. However, if you have a type certified engine in it, the question is are you following your own program or not? Now, the regulator said, no, you will follow the program that they've accepted already for your non-type certified aircraft, even if it's got a type certified type of engine in.
Right. Okay.
So they have said, no, they will not be affected. Initially, when this came to a head, when the C of A's were stopped or not renewed, they weren't removed, they were just not renewed. There were a couple of non-type certified aircraft that got into that, and that's why it got quite iffy at a time, and then the regulator had to clarify it. So it is going to only be for those aircraft that have either got to their maximum hours or their calendar year. Whichever comes first, then they will be eligible for this program and they can move on to that. And their AMOs and AMEs will guide them on that process. And it might change in a few years from time as the program gets run. But I don't see big changes in it. It's pretty good. It's pretty thorough.
And that brings us to today's Wing Tip, brought to you by Exam Revolution. If you're busy with your ground school studies, here's a deal you don't want to miss. WhatsApp 066 012 3521 with the code word wingtip and get 15% off your next ground school course. Here's Giannis from Exam Revolution with your wingtip for today.
Hey guys, Giannis here from Exam Revolution, and the wingtip of the day is how would you characterize an air temperature of minus 15 degrees Celsius at 700 hectopascal level over Western Europe? These are the answer options. The very first thing that you need to know is that there's a table with flight levels and corresponding hectopascal pressures. You have to memorize that. There's no way of being able to calculate that because pressure doesn't decrease linearly, okay? So in this case, I've just given you 4 examples, and you can see that flight level 100 corresponds to the 700 hectopascal pressure level, okay? So if they talk about 700 hectopascals, that's actually 10,000 feet or flight level 100. So we need to go and figure out what should the ISA temperature be there, and then compare the ISA temperature to what they are saying it is, and then we'll get our answer. So formula to get the ISA temperature is we take our altitude, which is 10,000 foot, divide that by 1,000, times minus 2 degrees Celsius. Why? Because for every 1,000 foot we increase altitude, the temperature decreases by 2 degrees Celsius. And then we add 15 degrees Celsius because we're starting sea level at 15 degrees Celsius. When you do that calculation, you'll see you get minus 20 plus 15 degrees Celsius, and that gives you a temperature of minus 5 degrees Celsius. So that is what ISA says it should be at 10,000 feet. However, in the question, it says it's minus 15 degrees Celsius, so it's 10 degrees colder actually than what ISA says it should be. So the most correct answer will be that we can characterize that air as a low temperature because the other options does not make sense.
From takeoff to landing, we've got you covered. Stay with us.
Let's talk about the resale value of aircraft now, right? Let's call it a CMP engine now. Will that CMP engine still be seen as a call it a zero-timed engine in the market, or is it going to drop in value?
So previously, when it was on the ARC 1819, the engines and the aircraft were over hours, over calendar years, and there was still a massive market. How the value of them suddenly dropped is that now you've got an aircraft that either you overhaul it at massive expense, and you would have to build that into the cost. So the value of those aircraft dropped overnight.
Yes.
This will then put that value back. Because remember, in other countries, you could purchase those aircraft. You could export them. The problem that we had is you couldn't get an export C of A.
Oh, right.
So that was the problem.
Okay.
So you could take the wings off and everything, and without an export C of A, sell it. But then also a lot of the people buying these aircraft realized, oh, South Africa's in a problem. They were offering rock bottom prices, etc., etc. So this should regularize it, and it should bring the value back into the industry. Because if you want to take it into the type certified environment on the OEM side, all that you're going to do is overhaul it. But what's happening in South Africa, a lot of people fly these aircraft very seldomly. So they've got a long lifespan, especially for the older aircraft. So this will just give them their normal lifespan, and most probably those aircraft would never get an overhaul because nobody wants to fly them anymore eventually. And they will just get put out to pasture.
So the press release said also that the document needs to be translated into Afrikaans now. So just explain that to us. Why is that so critical, and typically how long does that take?
So with all regulation or acts in South Africa, we have 11 official languages. For aviation, it's a mandatory translation. You with any regulation, you translate it into 2 of the official languages, English and another. So in aviation, it's English and Afrikaans because it was predominantly like that. So with whatever is decided upon, and I need to just explain the process. So the recommendation is done. It will go through a section between the secretariat, the legal side, and the experts in the CAA, and the DOT's legal team that does the regularization of the legislation into legalese, let's call it that. There might be some minor changes, commas here, just as long as the content and the intent is not changed.
Yeah.
That then, once that is gone through that process, normally what happens, it gets put into an amendment. You combined many of these regulations, CATs and CARs, and they get put into an amendment, like we are awaiting the 33rd amendment. That is with the minister at the moment for promulgation. So this is being asked to go an urgent way. So it by itself will go through to that team. They would work on it. Once they're both happy, the final version then will get submitted to the minister. The minister will then give it a review. Normally, her teams will do that. It's obviously not the minister herself. And she will then promulgate it. She will sign it off and give a date from that promulgation. Normally, a promulgation is done of the date she signs it. However, and the reason I say she is our minister is a female gender at the present moment. So whoever is the minister at the time will sign that off. They can also give a date in the future which it will be enacted. But we believe this will be urgent. The moment she signs it, the moment it will be enacted, and then you can act upon it. It doesn't mean you can suddenly jump in your aircraft. You're then going to have your AMO follow the procedures and all the rest of it. So it's not going to be the golden wand. You suddenly in your aircraft, off you go. You are going to be taking how this is going to work practically. So it's going to be a gradual move into it. And there's going to be some that are going to be in front of the queue at the AMOs that are going to get this, because everybody's going to dash to the AMOs. Do we have the capacity? I don't think so. We didn't have the capacity to even do all the overhauls. And then there are going to be some spares required. Are the suppliers ready with the O-rings and the seals and all the stuff that might need to be changed because these aircraft have been mothballed?
Yeah, exactly. So typically, in your estimation, more or less, timeline-wise, what are we looking at?
So right from the beginning, if you follow from the ARC task team, so that was the one that has been working on this for the majority of the time, we stated from when the versions were put in December of 2025, that it would be approximately a 6-month period. So we are within that timeline.
Okay.
So it's now going out for promulgation to the ministers, to the CAA and the DOT's team. We believe that can be done quite quickly. So maybe a week or two from when they start working on it to iron that out, because it's only 3 documents technically that they need there. And then it would go through to the minister. So we were thinking end of May, end of June, worst case scenario, July.
Okay.
So it still fits into what we've suggested. We believe it might be earlier, because the director can, once it's got to the stage where industry has agreed and the minister just has to agree as well, that they can put an interim relief, be it a general notice or an AMOC or something that says, on the basis of this, you can start working on it now. It's not a safety issue.
Right.
So we are awaiting that. We are hoping for that.
But until that happens, the 12-year rule is still
Stands.
law, right?
It's
So
law.
let's make it practical now. Let's say I own an aircraft now and my engine is due or hits a 12-year mark tomorrow. What do I do now?
So what you would need to do is go and look at what has been put forward. They were available on the CAA website for you to comment on, or the industry to comment on. They've got the appendice 43 Appendix 3, the AMOs, the owner operators need to get together with the AMOs, say, right, this is what's coming. Can you prepare the documentation? Can you get this all ready as soon as it's done, that we can get going with this? So they can start doing that in the interim to prepare. I think there's going to be a massive dash on it. I would say most of the really good AMOs, and there's a lot out there, they will already be working on this. They will, and looking at which of their clients are affected, etc. The other element is, where are these aircraft? Because you're going to have aircraft sitting in hangars all around the place. You can't just get them there. They're going to have to apply for a ferry without a C of A to get them to their AMOs. So they need to speak to the regulator to get those in practice, so they can get the aircraft from wherever it's hangared to the AMO to have the work done, unless it's a mobile AMO that's going to go out to these places and do it. The other elements that need to be looked at, which this is for the owners need to do, it's not just on the engines. Maybe they should be going to the ATOs on similar aircraft and doing some flights, a few hours here and there, just to get themselves back up to speed and current. Because absolutely, as soon as those aircraft are up and ready, the guys are going to want to fly them. The girls are going to want to fly them. So it would be very bad that they suddenly jumped into the aircraft after not having flown for ostensibly a year, if not more. You're going to be very, very rusty. And that's our biggest safety concern. So I think that needs to be looked at, and every pilot's going to have to look at himself in the mirror and say, I'm going to need to do some work.
Yes, absolutely. Let me segue now to the insurance part of this, right? So, I mean, now the risk is going to be real because let's say an owner goes over onto the CMP program, right? And something does happen engine related to that aircraft. How is the insurance going to treat that?
So the insurance is actually very, very simple. The insurance companies say you must comply with the regulations or the exemptions and AMOCs that are in place. So the moment that this is promulgated, it is a regulation with its ancillary CATs and appendices, etc., etc. So the insurers, the underwriters will absolutely accept that, no change. So you will, as long as you're complying with it. Obviously, if you are an owner that wants to go and get training and you do not follow this, you take your aircraft and you try and get owner training without it having done its 12-year overhaul, then obviously they would most probably repudiate, like they did with the flight school down in Cape Town. So that is the bottom line. So the insurance will absolutely be covered as far as we've understood and speaking to the insurance houses. As soon as it's law promulgated, off they go. Or if the regulator gives an AMOC or a general notice, etc., that allows that to happen. Remember, there is a bit of contention. Remember, they issued a general notice previously, which sometime repudiated on that with the Cape Town issue, where certain of the legal fraternity did not agree that the general notice is an exemption or an AMOC or the same as. So we believe they would have to bring out something, but I think it will smooth out as it goes. So I think the insurance side is not really a problem at all.
How do we ensure, though, that condition monitoring versus neglect monitoring, right? How do we ensure now, and what safeguards are there in place in the amendment to keep the sky safe, Kevin?
So it's the same. When you apply for your C of A, the regulator, which does that job, will check that all the checks and balances have been done, that your CMP has been followed, that all the packs, etc., have been completed. When they do their audits of the AMOs, they'll say, right, which of these aircrafts on your books are on a CMP program? They will check that all those packs have been completed. So nothing has changed. The oversight system is still there. The owners will need to check that they're doing it, but the AMOs are not going to sign out an aircraft that hasn't followed the CMP process and done all the checks and balances. So safety will be assured. Can somebody not follow that? Absolutely. There are those that don't follow it or illegally do something, and you might have the odd unscrupulous AMO that signs something incorrectly, but that's why the CAA audits those AMOs to check them. So I don't think there's any change. I think 95%, if not 99% of aviation wants to do things the right way, wants to comply safely. They just don't want too many, let's call it bureaucratic issues to get in the way. And I think we've got it as best as we can that can give the regulator the comfort that safety has been looked at and that this ongoing maintenance will do what it's been doing for 20 years. It's just going to be a slightly few more checks and balances. That's all.
How's the relationship between the industry task teams and the CAA evolved over this whole process? Do you think there's a little bit more listening taking place?
So let's be blunt. Whenever you take a regulator to court, the relationship gets a little bit tough.
Yeah.
But you must also go with what the director has said. The director at her annual awards that she gives out has always said that if she's awarding a company for doing, very well in industry, it does not mean that she will not hold them accountable and take action that she must. The same way as we believe the regulator has to understand that industry was not happy with their decisions and tried various different methodologies. And there was lots of negotiation. There was lots of time for the regulator to come to the party. I think since then, on both sides, learnings have been made. I think industry will try to be a little bit more tolerant, although we're still going to hold the line. We're going to still hold the regulator accountable for doing what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to regulate. They're not supposed to inhibit the industry. And sure. I think you are starting to see in many of the departments, they're starting to integrate and involve the industry earlier in their decision making rather than at a late stage. And many of the departments, I can name some of them, your Part 139 departments have always been known for speaking with industry right up front. So you get a meeting of the minds and then regulating. The 141, similarly. Some of those other departments can take those learnings that have been there, and I would imagine airworthiness is one of them that can take some of the learnings there. And I think they are. There's a lot of forums where they're starting to discuss stuff up front. So I think the relationship is now moving in the right direction. I think it did fragment the industry a bit for those that didn't agree with taking the regulator to court and thinking that you can just negotiate. Some of us have been negotiating with the regulator for many years, and sometimes there's a line in the sand where you're not getting any further that maybe that needs to happen. The big things that came out of it is that the regulator is going to have to do a much better job at their safety cases. There was no real safety case that they put forward here. And the other thing that they failed to do was an economic impact assessment. What was it going to cost the industry? So I think those learnings are going to be taken on board with the regulator, and you're going to see that permeating into their decision-making process. Obviously, us as industry bodies, and the ARC 1819 task team was an amalgamation of many bodies. I think those industry bodies will still hold the line, will still make sure that the director is accountable to the industry. They need to make sure that we get the growth, we get the development.
Yeah.
Always regulation will always be on the back burner. It will come behind what industry innovates with. But I think that gap is getting closer, and I think we're getting closer to world's best practice. So, yeah, I think the relationship was slightly damaged, but it's back on track. And I think we know that industry will take the regulator to court if they don't. And I think the regulator realizes we're not just all about talking. We will hold the line if we have to. We don't want to. Nobody wants to go to court. And also, it's a complete waste of money.
Absolutely.
Absolute waste of money. The only people who really get wealthy in that are the lawyers. However, sometimes it's necessary. And I do not believe, and this is my personal opinion, I do not believe we would have got to this level if we had not have gone to court. There was just too much pushback. There was not the intent from that department to move it forward. And only once it went there and you saw the judgment, even though industry technically lost on a legal issue, not on the content, not on the real meritorious stuff that was in there. The CAA learned some stuff. And in our meetings that we've had with them, they say, well, there's learnings on both sides. We can see our errors and we don't agree with everything in the judgment. And we can say, yeah, okay, let's get the talking happening a lot more, but there needs to be a lot more listening.
Exactly.
And I think we're there. We don't have a bad relationship with the regulator.
Oh, that's good.
But and I think it mustn't be portrayed. There's certain sects that are portraying things that they're doing this better or that. Industry needs to stand together. Each of them have their value, and each of them have their elements where they do very well. But the likes of the Aero Club, the likes of AWAC, the likes of the new organization, this 91 consortium, it's fantastic. You want them all together. I think you want AOPA to get more into doing what they used to do, which was negotiate rather than just fight, really. So I think AOPA can do a lot. They were the only ones that really objected to this matter because they weren't party to the process, really. So they need to get more involved, and I think lots of people need to get over themselves. Simple as that.
For people watching and listening now that is not part of the Aero Club or CAASA or one of these bodies and so on, how much of this whole, let's call it the victory or the amendment if you really want to call it that, is due to the power in numbers?
I think it's critical with the power in numbers. I'm a firm believer, and it's not because I run an organization as the CEO of one. I have been an Aero Club member for many years. I believe in numbers. So I believe everybody should be part of an association. I think when you have a problem, the problem is if it's just once off, the association still happen. But normally, if it's a big problem, the numbers then validate that problem. And when you go as an association to the regulator, you take the he said, she said out of it. It's this matter We're dealing with it for these people. So I would like to see, and I believe that everybody should be part of an association, but it's not what the association does for you. It's what you do for your association. It's a critical thing. There's lots of experts, lots of people that have got fantastic skill sets in the industry. They should be coming with those to the association and say, I can help here, I can help there. And that's where we draw our expertise. That is where we become very, very strong. And the regulator does not have that capacity. You know, we've got the BEE issues and all of that. We've got lots of experience and very old, grey-haired, young, you know, I'm calling them young gentlemen, but people that have got lots of experience.
Absolutely.
The regulator needs to be able to draw on that experience. So I think the associations have that experience. They can garner that experience. They can bring it forward. And it allows an objective point of view. So if I'm angry for some reason, that objective point of view comes through. If I, as a pilot, are unhappy with something that happened. And also the associations can say, listen, sometimes as a pilot, you need to pull your neck back. You're not right here. You need to look at it from this perspective. You need to also look at it from the regulator's point of view. They've got a job to do, and a very vital job to do.
Yeah.
Safety is very, very important, but it needs that balance.
Yes.
And I think we're getting to that balance. It was a little bit regulator heavy. It's now sort of evening out. So I think we're going into a good period. And I think on an international level, we're all looking at the bureaucracy. I'm sure you've seen the aircraft numbers and type certified. Over a 2-year period, they have dropped by about 13%.
Sure.
That's a lot. That means AMOs don't have as much business, et cetera, flying schools don't have as much business. So I think the regulator has to take that into consideration, and the associations will push that. The associations will help. And I don't mean we need myriads of associations. I think get involved with your association. And if you don't like the leadership, change it. It's a democratic methodology.
Yeah.
Change the leadership, bring in the people there. And I don't think anybody is a king of an association. They must change, they must mutate, and they must bring through the ideals of the populace.
Absolutely. Let's sum it up, Kevin, and I think to sum it up as well, I think there was a lot of stress that was caused by the 12-year rule for a lot of aircraft owners that was hands up and they're like hands in the air. They don't know what they're going to do going forward. What is your final message to them? And then also just to wrap this whole thing up, what can people expect and what is your final word on that?
Okay, so I think from everybody, whichever is your chosen association, get involved in your associations. They are going to be feeding information because they are at the CARComs, they are at all of that, and you will see that happening, and the regulator does that. The second thing that owners need to do is go to your AMO, whoever your AMO is, say, right, this is the status of my aircraft now. We envisage stuff is going to happen. Can I get a booking for whenever in the next near future? What is going to be needed to be done? Can we get the paperwork prepared up front? What are the costs going to be, et cetera, How do we get that sort of program going? The program is out there already. It's going to be roughly the same. So the documentation and that can be worked on immediately. So I think they need to do that. They also need to have a look and decide, am I wanting to put this aircraft into a flying school? Am I wanting to use it commercially? If I'm buying an aircraft, what is my intention with it? If it's that, then you need to realize, hey, the 12-year rule applies to me. I need to make sure I've ordered my spares, etc., for my overall, my engine, etc., and speak to the likes of the Absolutes and etc. to make sure you've got your spares. So I think that is there. There's a shortage of spares internationally. There's a shortage of engines.
Yeah.
So they need to do that. So do that up front. And then finally, and I think this is my most important message to everybody, those of you who have not been flying, that have not got your stick and rudder skills up to speed, go to your regular ATO, go to your regular CFI, etc. Spend a little bit of money, get in behind a stick or inside the plane, and go in and do a couple of hours refresher, warm up, get yourself ready so that when your plane is ready to go, you can jump in and enjoy the wonders of the sky. I think those are the things that really does it. And then don't think that the regulator is our enemy, even though we've been on two sides of a coin. Work with your regulator, hold them accountable, But remember, there's a lot of good people in there in the inspector level. Work with them, tell them where there's problems, etc. They will work with you. They're not there to fight with us on most of the things. But try to keep that relationship good and sound.
Kevin, finally, now that the 12-year rule has been addressed, what is it for the likes of, let's say, CAASA now? What are you going to address next for the GA community? What's next on the table?
So I think there's a lot of things on the table at the moment that need clarity. I think South Africa is dependent on the tourism industry, especially, and the CAA is dependent on the passenger safety charge, and that comes with tourists coming to this country for every bum on a seat. So I think we need to get the landing permits issue that is currently with the DOT, that is an absolute mess, and the foreign operators permits, that needs to be resolved right as we speak. We have got a team that's working on that at the moment, and the minister has taken the initiative to get an independent through Regenesis, Dr. Naidu, to have a look at what's going on. And give her a report so that she can put interventions in. So I think that's the next thing that is big on the agenda. And then I think the next elements that we really need to look at is the Part 149, and it's not particularly a CAASA matter per se. The Part 149, I think, is a big mess. It's been a mess for possibly 15 years. That work needs to be done so that all the recreational aviators out there have got a proper home. And we don't need multiple AROs. We need a few good working ones that are properly run, that can look after the safety elements, but are not unjustly treated by the regulator. And I think that's next on the list. It's also in process. It's just, a lot of work has to be done. Yeah. And it's slow work. Meetings, etc. And remember, we volunteers. Volunteers, you've got to find time out of your day. You've still got to keep food on the table. So industry volunteers their time. The regulator is paid. So the regulator, they really need to take that into consideration and act more quicker, if we can call it that.
Just to sum it up as well, for people to want to get involved in whichever way capacity, where can they get in touch?
So for CAASA, they can just go to our website. It guides you there. We mainly handle GA and commercial, with most of it's commercial. If you want to get involved with the recreational side, you've got the Aero Club of South Africa. You've also got your watchdog bodies that keep an eye on the regulator, like AWAC, etc. And then you've got your other associations. MOGAS, for example, is looking after the motorized gliders, etc., and also has a part to play. And the Part 91 consortium that's started up in the Cape area, I've got no problem with them at all. I think they've got an area to play. I think they're taking over roughly from what AOPA used to do, and maybe AOPA needs to look at that. So I think get hold of those associations. They've got websites, they've got contacts. If you don't have it through CAASA, I can give you links to that. But most of them have websites. And then whatever sport discipline, if you're into power flying and accuracy, etc., the likes of SAPFA, if you're into EAA, experimental aircraft, and having fun, the EAA chapters are fantastic. If you're into gliding, Triple SA, etc., and then some of the other strange things which I'm not going to talk about here. So
there we go. Kevin, thank you so much for clarifying this. I think there was a big, huge, a lot of stress, as I said earlier, about this whole amendment and how it's going to play out. And I think it was great that you joined us this morning just to clarify that. So thank you for your time on that. And then we'll obviously stay in touch as it rolls out and the timelines as well. We'll keep in touch on that.
No problem. And if there's any other matters that come up or you want feedback on, reach out. We've got various experts that can come in and assist you and give guidance on those, from AMOs to training organizations. So feel free to use our expertise. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And that's it for this episode of Let's Swing It. Till next time, we'll see you again. Cheers. Bye.
Blue skies, tailwinds, and more aviation adventures. See you in the next one.